Yeah, I can't see the full list, so we'll
Yeah, that's what that little
take it slow.
bar on the side is for.
No,
You
no,
can
I've got,
slide it down.
I know, I
I think so.
understand
The
how.
meeting is live now.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone to the
I don't see it.
Comox Strathona Regional Hospital District Board for the board meeting of Thursday, February 25th, 21. I am told we have a quorum, so uh, just like to recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. And first item of business is adoption of the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anyone in, or is there any discussion? Hearing none. Is there anyone in opposition? Hearing none, we'll call that moved. Business arising from the minutes? Any business? Hearing none, so we will go to item 1, the commemorative plaque. Motion to receive?
So moved. Director Unger.
Thank you. And I guess, well, I guess we need the verbal update first, but is staff ready? Is Russell here or Jake or?
Good morning, Director. Good morning, Chair Cornfield. Good morning, Board. Jake Martins, our General Manager of Corporate Services, will be able to provide a brief update on this topic.
Super.
Thank you, James, and through the chair. Yeah, so just a quick verbal update on this initiative. So this was raised at the last meeting and deferred for consideration to this meeting. Staff did take the opportunity after the meeting to connect with Island Health and specifically the site operations manager who reviewed the commemorative plaque locations at both the Comox Valley and Campbell River campuses. That individual felt that the relocation was not recommended or supported at this time, as it was felt that it was an appropriate spot. This information was conveyed to Director Abram, who I understand may be interested in bringing forward a request at a future meeting at some time when a bit more information can be gathered. So invite any further questions or comments in that regard.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, Jake. So any questions or comments?
Yep.
Director Abram.
See that hand there, Charlie?
I can see your hand.
Okay. So, yes, Jake did call me up and tell me what the decision of the people that looked at it was. I still disagree with them. There is absolutely no reason why that cannot be fit into that particular spot with a slight shave of the coping on both corners. It would fit just perfectly and it would look very nice. Much nicer than where it is back in the corner, stuffed in with other posters and things like that. We spent how many years trying to get hospitals? So I'd like to see some recognition of that, of our board of the day to for the public to see when they come into the hospital.
Okay. Thank you, Director Abram. I have Director Unger next.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair. I think my 2 cents would be is the plaque is okay where it is. Maybe just ask staff of the hospital not to put their posters and information stuff right in front of it, and it would be fine.
Okay.
Go.
Thank you. And just remind directors to turn their hands off when they're done. Thanks. Okay, any further comments? Any further action? Seeing none on receipt of the verbal update. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, we'll call that done. Passed. No petitions and delegations under reports. First one is our management report. So
Move receipt.
Thank
Second.
you.
Move receipt.
Thank you. Any discussion on the management report? I'm not seeing any hands, so is there anyone opposed? Seeing none or hearing none, I will call that matter closed and motion passes. Item 2, Comox Strathona Regional Hospital District Letters Patent Cayuga Checklist membership.
Move receipt.
Move receipt.
Thank you. Discussion? No one has any discussion on it or any questions? Oh, Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say how illuminating I found the background material, and thanks very much to the Cayuga people and checklist people for providing that to us. And I just wonder if staff could give us a brief comment on what process we follow going forward here.
Okay, Jake, did you want to tackle it or?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so staff have engaged with staff at Cayuga Checklist First Nation, as well as their representative, Ms. Christensen, who is on the line, and so would certainly invite her to provide also any additional comments. We've also had a call with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs in regards to this transition. By and large, it seems fairly straightforward. We are just awaiting the order in council that will be issued by the minister, and we're anticipating that, of course, to take effect on April 1st. But as noted in the staff report, logistically, there's no major decision points or changes that need to be made. It's largely a pretty straightforward transition.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I speak? It's Director Lee.
Did you have your hand up?
I don't know. Here, I'll put my hand up. You want?
Okay.
There
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
I would just like to welcome Samantha Christensen and hope that she's going to be our permanent representative on that hospital board. I've known her for at least 2 decades, and through her work at the regional district prior to this, and she's going to be great to work with. So welcome, Samantha.
Well said, Brenda. Don't forget to turn your hand off.
Thank you.
And what?
Leave.
Thank you. Samantha, can, if no one else has any further comments, Sam, did you want to say a few words?
Well, I'll just want to say on behalf of Cayuga Checklist that we are very excited to become a member of the regional district and on the hospital board as well, and be active partners. There's so many possibilities, and really looking forward to this relationship. The one step more in our implementing our mono final agreement, and yeah, it is great. And thank you so much for the welcome to me. Brenda's right. When I was working in my past life with the community cable, I did cover the regional district way back when it was both Comox Strathona Regional District. They were exciting days. And, so yes, thank you very, very much. From
Well, welcome. Welcome, Samantha. I share Director Lee's comments as well, and we have enjoyed your participation as observer status for the last number of years. So yes, it's going to be a momentous occasion. And next speaker is Director Colburn. Julie, are you on the line?
Good morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. I am just, Samantha has been, since I've essentially been on the board here, had great participation on observatory status. Is there any opportunity to do any type of celebratory event or anything, knowing that we're doing things distance in our first meeting following the April 1st joining date official. Is there any opportunity for that or anything that anybody would like to put forward or any plans?
No. Thank you, Director Colburn. Maybe refer that to James Warren.
Thanks, Chair. Certainly, the CSRHC, we could consider a press release or some sort of formal announcement to acknowledge and recognize the formal addition of, I guess, Director Christensen.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I think it's really important to celebrate and welcome officially. And so something celebratory to do so, I would welcome.
If I can, when's our first meeting after the 1st of April?
We can just double check that. Do we have that date handy? April 8th would be our first hospital board meeting following April 1st.
Okay, so that would set us a time frame to make sure that we have protocols in place on gift exchange or recognition or whatever, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Director Abram.
Yeah, I would hope that everybody would be thinking that would be a virtual meeting. We're not going to be in any position to hold regular meetings at that time, the way things are moving right now. So
Okay.
virtual or not at all.
Okay, can I make a suggestion through to the board that we refer this item to chair and vice chair and our staff to come up with appropriate recognition of the new letters patent and participation by Cayuga Check, like I said.
So moved. Director Lease.
Okay. Seconder. Thank you. And
I would second that.
okay, and Director Colburn, I saw your hand, but now it's not up. Did you want to say anything?
I was just going to move a motion. I was wondering if you wanted a subsequent after or if you wanted us to do it now. So that was my only question.
Okay, well, we are, I guess, on receipt, but so I'll call a question on receipt first, and then considering that we have a motion that's been moved and seconded, I think we can just go with that one. So on receipt, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? I'll call that carried. And did staff get that? I think it was moved by Director Adams or Director Lee and seconded by Director Adams or vice versa. Do staff have that motion?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Okay. So can you just read it out so that everybody knows what we're voting on?
Okay, so this is to refer the matter to the chair and vice chair and staff to come up with an appropriate recognition for April 8th.
Okay. Is everybody clear? Seeing none, I will call a question. Is there anyone opposed? I call it carried. On to item 3, our recommended budget.
Move receipt.
Move receipt of the report.
Thank you. So we have a motion on receipt, and we will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin Duville, our Manager of Financial Planning Services, is here to present an update on the staff report. Kevin?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to the directors, good morning. So in your package today is the 2021 recommended budget for your consideration. Back on November 12th, the provisional budget was brought forward to this board and was approved as was required prior to December 31st of the prior year to this current fiscal year. So now what's in front of you, based on the directions we received from the directors at that time, is a recommended budget with a requisition of $12,600,000, which is a reduction of $4.4 million from the $17 million that was requisitioned in 2020. Within that budget, it continues to be debt servicing costs of $10.74 million, $1.88 million for healthcare grants, and another $276,000 in general operational costs for the service. To give you a sense of the requisition or tax impact change, a result of the reduction in the requisition, so in 2020, for a home assessed at $500,000, the tax impact would have been $270. With the reduction in the requisition this year, based on a similar $500,000 assessed home, that requisition would now be $191, so a difference of $79 for that type of household. The 2020 surplus has also been finalized and included in this financial plan, and that 2020 surplus was $1,022,694, resulting from unspent allocation of community grants and other general spending, the latter being largely due to COVID-19 and some of the reduced spending that resulted. With respect to the future expenditure reserves, we are still putting some dollars into reserves, largely the surplus I just mentioned. So with that, after taking away roughly $2 million in continued commitments to Island Health for previously approved capital projects, the board would have at its discretion $23 million approximately for future priorities. And lastly, as in past years, the $1.85 million that the board allocates annually to various capital projects will continue to be fully funded by the current year taxation, with any unspent amounts at the end of the year then potentially transferred over to reserves. Also, accompanying the report on the financial plan is also the 2021 project list submitted by Island Health for your information. And I'll perhaps leave it there and certainly welcome any questions.
Okay. Discussion. I don't see any. Oh, there's a hand. Director Lee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the chair to Kevin, our finance manager. Can you tell me whether the $447,000 that was in requisitioned by Island Health, is that included in the budget here? Those capital projects that totaled $447,000?
So through the chair to Director Lee. So right now we have included the entire 1.85 million. We haven't broken it down based on the report that's in front of you today as yet. We will be making that determination kind of later on in this year, and certainly based on the board's direction, partly potentially by way of strategic planning, which is upcoming.
Also, one subsequent, would there be any possibility of doubling the amount we give to the small rural community clinics from 5,000 to 10,000 in the 2021 budget? I'm thinking that might be important during COVID to make sure everybody's got the supplies they need to inoculate and hold special, all the sterile equipment and things they might need for dealing with a pandemic, as well as they haven't been increased for about 10 years, and 5,000 a year isn't very much. So is there a possibility of increasing that now?
Through the chair to Director Lee, this is Maury Fort speaking. So in following up on strategic planning and looking at the areas that the board noted as interest at the last meeting, we have explored the rural community grants a little bit more, and that's included in your package that was sent yesterday. We do have Island Health looking at that and what the opportunities are to support those smaller facilities and doing some outreach with them. You know, the 6 facilities have received that 5,000 allocation, which is unconditional and typically used for operating since 2016. So it has been quite a while since they've had an increase. So my understanding is Island Health representatives are going to be reaching out and discussing with them potential uses of those funds and if there's a need and sort of what that need might look like. And so as staff, what we sort of considered is that 1.85 allocation that we do provide through the budget. There is, you know, typically some room left at that point. So we thought that it doesn't necessarily, we wouldn't think that it needed an adjustment to the budget proposed as today, because there's essentially some room within that allowance. So it provides some opportunity for the board and Island Health to explore that further and ensure that those funding allocations can be made if determined to be, you know, needed and utilized.
One further.
Okay, make it quick, please.
Well, the monies that we give to our clinics is our local taxpayer money. It's not controlled by Island Health, and I don't see the need to consult with them about increasing the amount that we grant to them. I would prefer that our regional hospital district maintains control of its budgets and not be dictated to by Island Health.
Thank you, Director Lee. Just to clarify, I think what staff said is that's one of the topics that's going to be in on our strategic planning session. So any changes, amendments, or discussion should be following our strategic planning session. And I would request you bring it up at the strategic planning. Next speaker is Director Morin.
Thank you, Chair. That was quick. I didn't know I was next in the queue. I was actually going to bring up the same thing as Director Lee, so thank you for bringing that up. And I agree. I think that we should look at some larger allocations for those rural areas. Thank you.
Okay. Director Colburn.
Although I am in favor of looking at those, I do think that the appropriate place is at the strategic planning. I really think that through discussions with the healthcare center here, through the discussions with Alison Habkirk that we have had after the last meeting to prep us for this meeting, I think that that's a model that needs to be looked at, not necessarily a one-year allocation increase. And so I would welcome the conversation at this session and not be in favor of doing it for this year for those purposes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Wally followed by Director Adams before I go back to previous speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just a clarification from staff. I had asked at the last meeting and they had said they would clarify it at this one. Concerning that the $5,000 we grant, in the past I had asked Beth Dunlop if that could be used for operational expenses, and she adamantly had said no, because our mandate was capital, could only be capital, and that's the understanding that our local health clinic had here in Sayward. And as I had said before, they had asked me for grants and aid to make up for some operating costs over the years. So I wonder if staff could just clarify it. Is it really fact that they can use that $5,000 they currently get for operating expenses?
Through the chair to Director Wally, through our conversations with Island Health and reviewing sort of correspondence we've had with the smaller clinics, our understanding is it's more for operational. It could be sort of minor capital that we wouldn't consider as sort of a major investment. But you know, those grants, as far as our understanding, are unconditional global grants. There have been some of those facilities who have asked for additional money, which are more of a capital allocation. And noted in the strategic planning documents, you'll see, say, QCIT had a dock repair, and there's a couple of other smaller capital items outside of the 5,000 that have been approved for those clinics, and those have been within that 1.85 annual allocation. Yeah, so I think.
I'll pass that on to the local clinic. Thank you.
Okay, Director Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate what Ms. Fort has said, the $5,000 that is proposed in the budget is set for all of these small clinics. However, there is an opportunity throughout the year for other requests to be addressed by the board as they come in. And that's what we had determined when we did the financial planning process, and I would like to stick with that. Certainly agree with the recommendation to carry this forward for discussion in our later strategic planning processes as to how we move forward for this. But I think for 2021, we have already addressed that in our financial planning session. Thank you.
Okay. For the second time, Director Lee.
Oh, no. No, I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay. So any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Director Davis.
Thank you, Chair. This is regarding the $5,000 again. I realize we're going to be discussing this further in, but I guess to our Director of Finances, one of the comments I got from our people here was, is it possible to carry part of the $5,000 over from one year to the next? Because we're sort of in a use it or lose it situation where it gets taken back if it's not spent. And they would certainly like some flexibility in carrying monies forward from one year to the other if there's a larger capital cost that they may be using it for.
Okay, to staff.
And I think Kevin Duville can provide an answer to this one.
Thank you through the chairs to the director. So yes, I mean, given it is an unconditional grant, we do disperse that. Typically once the hospital requisition was received in August, outside of requesting some reporting as to how those dollars were spent, we wouldn't necessarily be looking to claw back any unspent money if within that reporting they provided some rationale as to why the money couldn't be spent and that they were requesting that it be carried forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Your hand's still up, Director Davis. Thank you. Any further discussion? I just have one question about that. If it was carryover funding, they're guaranteed their well, I won't say guaranteed, but our $5,000 grant has been consistent every year. So that would indicate to me that they needed more than the 5,000 next year when they hadn't spent 5,000 before. So like I said, we'll have more discussion as part of the strategic session. Anything further on the item? So call a question. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, carry that past. Under the recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Seeing none, I will call a question. Is there anyone in opposition? Nope, thank you. And no opposition, so we'll call that passed. So bylaws, first, second, and third readings.
So moved.
Second, Director Evans.
Okay, just through to staff for clarity, do we have to give first and second concurrently and then do third?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, so I guess the first one is to first and second readings concurrently. And I'm assuming that's what the directors meant when they moved the motion. So is there any discussion? Seeing none, call a question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Third reading.
Move third reading.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none. Is there anyone in opposition? Seeing none, hearing none, and third reading is passed. Recommendations for bylaw 296, capital expenditure bylaw.
So moved.
Move first and second reading.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Any comments from staff? Seeing none, call a question. Is there anyone in opposition? Okay, motion carries. Third reading on capital.
I'll move third reading, Director Adams.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, call a question. Anyone in opposition? Seeing and hearing none, call the third reading passes. And now we go to item H, our strategic planning session. So I will turn the function over to, I guess, to James Warren and our consultant, Allison Hapkirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and pleased to be able to introduce to the board our phase 2 of the strategic planning session. Allison Hapkirk is with us again today and has been busy since the last hospital board meeting that we had in conducting interviews and exploring some of these issues. So Allison has a PowerPoint presentation to work with the board on today and then get into some dialogue and discussion. And I believe I saw Scott McCartan and Chris Sullivan both on the line. And I didn't see anybody else from Island Health, but certainly Scott and Chris are here with us today. So, and Matt is also on the line. Thanks for joining us from Island Health. So without further ado, Allison, pleased to turn the microphone over to you.
Thanks so much, James. If I get our clicker to work. There we go. Thank you to all of you, and thanks for the opportunity to come back and go into phase 2 of our process. So here's what I suggest our objectives are today. I want to report out on the interviews that I had with all of you and late in, actually I think it was early February, and to hopefully determine the level of interest more certainly about expanding the mandate. So just to get a little more clarity from the board about where you sit. And then to look at some Island Health potential innovative financial arrangement partnerships. This is in response to numerous requests that I heard during the interviews. And then also to provide a couple of examples of arrangements elsewhere in other health authorities and with regional hospital districts. Again, in response to some of the requests I heard in the interviews. So is everybody comfortable with those as our objectives? Any concerns about that?
Hello,
Director Lee?
My concern is that the first strategic planning we had very definitively had the board saying, no, we're not interested in taking on any further investments at this time and changing our mandate. Then you broke us up into small groups, and the small groups came back and said the same thing. Then you had interviews. I don't know what each individual board member said during the interviews, but leading up to those interviews, it was very clear the board was not interested in carrying on with discussions with Island Health about investing in their capital priorities. And I feel that it is a little bit obscure that you had private interviews with people and the whole board didn't hear what each person said. So I cannot evaluate that. And I wouldn't understand it being a change from the first meetings we had. So I still personally, as a director on this board, I stand opposed to expanding our mandate, except for those areas where we already have capital investments, such as maybe considering an expansion of psychiatric beds at the Comox Valley Hospital. We already invest capital in that, so that isn't an expansion of our mandate. And I wouldn't have a problem if there's a need for more psychiatric beds, but I'm very mistrustful of this process, I have to say. And, you know, how many times do we have to say no and not be heard?
Yeah, thank you, Director Lee. And I think at the end of this meeting, I think if there are concerns about that, we will ask for some kind of input from all of the board. I think there clearly, from my discussions, there is a broad range of points of view on this board, and at the very least, I would like to present what I heard from the interviews, and I will welcome those who represented various views to speak and to be heard today. Director Adams.
Thank you, and thank you, Allison. And great to have you back again. I share the comments of Director Lee. We had a very wholesome discussion on this issue at the first strategic session, and I thought the wrap-up was pretty conclusive. That the pay-to-play model as it stands right now was not something that this board wished to entertain. That being said, if it is the desire of Minister Dix and the provincial government to change the formula that is equitable throughout the regional district or the hospital districts, then that's a different story. And that can be part of a larger conversation directly with the provincial government. But to have Island Health, you know, they put their proposal forward. We had a healthy discussion on it. We were pretty clear in the summations from each of the breakout groups. And to be honest, I'm a little bit offended that we're back addressing the same thing that we spent the first session talking about. I thought it was clear that if anything, we would entertain a discussion with Minister Dix or his staff provincially to look at how this was going to be done on an equitable basis. But the fact that we're being asked to come up with a 40% cost share for a long-term care facility or something else where other facilities within the Island Health region recently have been built that have been 100% paid by Island Health. There is a imbalance, and I certainly appreciate that Island Health doesn't have all the funds to do all the things that they would like to do. But this is a provincial issue and legislation on the role and governance of island regional health boards and also health authorities. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Adams. So I see Director Wally's hand is up, and then I would like to, if I could, I'd like to present what I heard in the discussions that I had with the directors. Director Wally?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree wholeheartedly with what Director Adams had just said and Director Lee prior to her. And I won't repeat what they said, but I thought it hit the nail on the head.
Thanks, Director Wally. Can we go? There we go. So let me just, first of all, thank everybody for taking the time to have a conversation with me. I spoke to all but one board member, and as you're aware, you were in groups together, so you heard what each other said. The discussions were, I thought, quite freewheeling and not too directive, so people did have a chance to have a discussion, and the discussions were all different, one from the other. And I want to especially acknowledge that there is, you know, this is a large board, and I guess as one would expect, there is real diversity of opinion around the board. There is everything from one end where they're very, shall we say, confident, knows absolutely no interest in expanding the mandate, to the other extreme. where there is openness to at least considering the possibility of expanding the mandate. And then considerable number of you in the middle who, again, possibly, maybe, conditionally, under certain circumstances. So that we'll just go through this, these few slides here, and I understand you have them in front of you. So first of all, just based on the discussion that we had last time, we asked in the small discussions what your priorities were in your communities. And as you can see from this slide, there is a lot of agreement about that these are the 5 top areas of interest for services, healthcare services in your communities. Only 13% said no. There was a percentage of you that didn't answer directly, and I quite purposefully didn't kind of force a clear decision one way or the other. And I like to think that those unknowns or unsure are partly a consequence of just the nature of the discussion we had. But I think, you know, by and large, I think you can feel fairly confident that these are across the hospital district, the areas of most interest to the directors and to your communities.
May I make a comment before you move on, please?
Yes, sure.
On that previous slide, yeah, my opinion is that those 5 priorities are, not to be critical, but I think they've been cherry picked. I know that several of us had brought up the pathology lab as a priority, and it is not on there. I believe it should have been. So I don't think those are necessarily representative of what the majority said.
I'm reporting what I heard. Yes, there were other things brought up, and you'll see in parts of my notes elsewhere there were concerns expressed about services that had been committed to and then moved or withdrawn. So I did recognize some of those other items elsewhere in my report. So it's when the question I asked, as you will recall, was, do these 5 priorities represent the highest concerns in your communities? And these are the results that I'm displaying on the screen now. Sorry, if we can just go to the next.
Allison, I took
Yes.
shorthand notes of the 4 groups that reported back, and I don't agree with your synopsis. There was no support for expanding services in any of those areas except perhaps mental health, which, as I said, we already invest capital in the psychiatric ward at Comox. So we already have that established. And also I agree with Director Wally. We're not investing in Island Health's pet projects unless they're going to keep our projects and our money here and not take them away and hive them off to their friends on Island Health Board. I'm referring directly to pathology.
Thank
Bring
you,
back
Director.
the pathology lab.
Thank you, Director Lee. These 5 priorities, or this slide that you have in front of you, doesn't represent areas that the question was not about expanding the mandate. It was about what are the 5 priorities in your communities for healthcare needs. So that's what we're looking at right now.
Well,
the next slide.
You spoon-fed us those priorities. You gave us those priorities in writing, and you asked the board to comment on them. Those were not generated by our board. They were generated by Island Health and yourself.
Director Lee, we've got Allison here today to report out on some of her findings and some of her interviews that were supporting the strategic planning process, which is a multi-step event. And she's got a couple of slides to get through, and then there would be opportunity for discussion on how to carry this forward and where the board as a whole wants to continue on. So I would ask that Allison be afforded that opportunity to share her information.
Yeah, and if I'm going to chime in here as well, James, to me it was very clear this was about communities. Then we talk about how that fits in with our mandate. And I think it's appropriate that we let Allison carry on. Make note of your questions and let her determine the flow, and we can cover all of it off, but let's let her do her spiel first, please.
Thanks, Chair Cornfield. So this slide was about, are you open to looking at expanding the mandate? And you can see 52% of you indicated that you would possibly be interested. 18% said yes, and 13% no. And again, I will acknowledge there are some very committed points of view around the table, but they are not unanimous. And these are the results that I heard. And so that said to me, and along with these, it said to me that, you know, there was some interest in getting more information, which is what we have planned to do today. This does not prejudge your decision-making in any way. It really is about providing information. Can we go to the next one? And then we asked, or I asked a more specific question about, were you interested in looking at innovative financial arrangements with Island Health? So some other ways of making contributions to health services. And again, almost half of you said yes. 22% said possibly. And again, there as 13% said no. So again, this led me to conclude that, okay, there is some interest here, again, not prejudging the outcome, but that we could provide you some information and some examples to consider. We go to the next one. So some of the key takeaways that I took from the discussions I had was that there is significant agreement on the 5 priorities, that these are the areas of healthcare services that you are most interested in and feel are of priority to your communities. The majority of the board is open to at least looking at options outside of the current mandate. The combined yes and possibly is 70%. And the majority of the board expressed interest in looking at innovative financial arrangements. Again, the combination of yes and possibly is 70%. There was also discussion of, and again, some very strongly contributed points of view around advocacy, the role of the board in advocacy. And one group in particular expressed a keen interest in formalizing and developing a plan for advocacy. The next one. I asked about ways that you would like to work with Island Health. Clearly, you know, there have been some sort of rough patches with this hospital district and Island Health. So I was interested to know if there were things that you as directors, you felt you could do differently, or if there were different ways that you could work with Island Health in a more constructive way. So these are some of the concerns. They were concerns expressed regarding the erosion and loss of services previously committed to Island Health. So this is the pathology lab is one of the things that I had in mind here. Concerns were also expressed about the challenges of working with a large bureaucracy like Island Health and the power imbalance that is just evident in that relationship. There were also concerns expressed about the disconnect between communities and Island Health, and many of the directors felt they'd like to see a better means of community input to Island Health. And interest was expressed in partnerships between not-for-profit organizations and Island Health as a means of providing services as well. Go to the next one. I asked a question about what kind of information you would need or you would want to make informed decisions. So there was need expressed for better information on how Island Health makes its decisions, the rationale, the information used, business cases. I heard, repeatedly that they just didn't feel the quality of the information was sufficient to really understand how Island Health was making their decisions. Secondly, that interest was expressed in the board having better information and advice regarding the decisions that they have to make. So there was quite a bit of discussion about feeling that they had, staff input or quality information that would support the board decision-making from the board point of view. And there was interest expressed in seeing examples from other regional health districts. So I'll just stop there and maybe ask for if there are any questions. I mean, yeah, let me ask if there are any questions about the data that I provided. And I understand that some of you aren't confident in the data or the information. It's maybe a stretch to call it data. I understand that there is disagreement around the board. But again, I would welcome all views to speak up. Director Grieve.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you for taking this great board on, because I tell you, it is a challenge. I've chaired it in the solid waste department before. But one of the things I see that's lacking here that we brought up in our group, and I think it's very valid and worth saying and bringing forward, is the fact that we have no dedicated staff person with the background to deal with this board. Unlike all our other functions and services, this one, we really don't have a dedicated person. And I think that should be brought forward, because without that that background and that kind of expertise, we're not going to get the communication we're looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Director Grieve. Can we just go back to the last slide? Yes, and I maybe didn't express this quite as well as I might have, but the second bullet point, interest was expressed in the board having better information and advice regarding decisions they have to make. That really does reflect exactly what you have just brought forward. I was reluctant to use the word staff, but that's the essence of it, that you feel that you would like more and better quality information in order to make well-informed decisions. Director Adams.
Thank you, Allison. And well, I agree with your reporting out of the summation of percentages as to what the feedback was. The one takeaway that is really absent in all of that is that it wasn't so much whether the board members were in favor of innovative financial options or not. It was what I heard from every single breakout group in their takeaway or in their summation was that it should be done on a health authority wide basis and not pitting one board against another board within the same health authority. And as a result, if there are innovative financial options to consider, those should be presented to Minister Dix and mandated on a provincial level that is fair and equitable across the respective health authorities. And your presentation doesn't reflect that, and that can cause some angst and division within how it's interpreted. So I just wanted to share that perspective from how I interpret it.
Yeah, thank you, Director Adams. That was brought up in at least one group, but it was not brought up in all of the groups, at least in what I heard. And again, I would just welcome some of the members who were in other groups to express their points of view as well. Director Anderson, I think.
Thank you. I think just first off, there might be a bit of confusion about the groups being discussed, because we did break out into groups last time we were all together. And then you had private interviews with a handful of groups. And I'm assuming that the information you're sharing with us here is a report out of those individual groups that you interviewed since we were last together. And what we are collectively remembering is the breakout groups that we all heard from. Is that correct?
Yes, and I did have a discussion with one of the groups about this. When we met as a board last time, we broke you out into random groups, sorted not by geographic area, but really mixed up, and we heard from you. And then when I met with the groups individually, we sorted you by geographic region, and just so that we would get a taste of both a mixed up subgroups and a taste of groups from regionally, because there are definitely regional differences on this board. So what I'm reporting out on is not our last board meeting, but rather the individual meetings that I had with board members.
That is my understanding. I just wanted to get that really clear, because if there's mistrust of this information that is based in this not being what we all heard from each other last time, then it's really understandable. But what I'm hearing is that you gleaned perhaps different information from the second breakout group. So just from my perspective, in those second breakout groups that you had individual interviews with, I was really grateful to be afforded that opportunity and to be able to be in a breakout group with my other rural colleagues. It allowed for a different kind of discussion. There are clearly some board members here, as we've seen this morning, who are very clear and very strong on their perspectives, and I really admire that and respect that and can follow their rationale and understand it well. And I think it's, as you're seeing in these graphs, it's much harder for those of us who feel like we need more information, are unsure, are curious, don't feel like there's really great communication, to have such strong points of view. And so I think that that's what we're seeing reflected in this, 50 to 70% of people either being unsure or wanting more information. I'm certainly in that category. And although I can very much understand where Director Lee and Adams and others are coming from around the provincial fairness of it, I'm also awake to the fact that, right or unright, this is the reality that we're now in. And we can absolutely choose high ground and choose to not play this way. And that would be totally justified and understandable. But I think it's also very justified and understandable to look at the fact that this is the world that we're in apparently now, however right or wrong. And can we be taking some opportunities in front of us to be serving our constituents in a more proactive way? So the way that you have done this, breaking us out in 2 or 3 different ways, has allowed that quieter voice to come forward, and I'm really grateful for that. Where to from here, I'm not entirely sure. I do want to hear from Island Health, and if we choose to not enter into new relationships with them, fair enough. But I think that regardless of whether we just choose a road of advocacy or whether we choose a road of significant new financial relationships, having better information and better communication, both with Island Health and with our communities, is going to be really paramount. And if we choose to do anything other than we have been doing historically, we are going to need some dedicated staff who really know how to liaise best between our interests, our community interests, and Island Health. And I'll just give the tiniest example around the Cortez Clinic has been interested in an addition for a decade. And when I see on Island's Health potential smaller capital upgrades, it's not there. And I don't know if that's because it's not an Island Health priority or because the Cortez Clinic has never had any idea who to talk to about that. I certainly haven't brought it forward to this board because this board hasn't been interested in these kinds of small capital things. I don't know if the nonprofit here knows the channels through which to communicate with Island Health. Certainly Island Health has never had a conversation with me about that. So not to get lost in those details, but I think that it is our role to be able to bring forward these kinds of these community interests now that we're not focusing all of our attention on hospitals. So this kind of better relationship and better communication across the board, I think, really imperative, and I thank you for your work.
Thank you. Director Hillian.
Thank you, Allison, and thanks very much for the work involved in putting your presentation together and the time you spent with us. Just a couple of points to make. First of all, I think in the 4 of us who met with you from Courtney, I think there was general consensus that we were wary of new commitments of local taxpayers' dollars for major projects, but we didn't want to close the door to the possibility entirely because we felt it was important to to be open to the possibility of improved outcomes. I'd also like to agree with Director Grieve on the lack of expertise that we have. I think our staff do an incredible job of navigating through this board for us. But the fact that I've been on the board for 2 years now, and I don't know who our key person at Island Health is that we have a relationship with to work through these different issues. And I think that would be really helpful if we had, of course, the pandemic hasn't helped, but I think it would be really helpful if we had 1 or 2 key people that we could sit down with on a regular basis and work through why decisions are made, how we effectively advocate if in fact we're going to do that, and how we make effective decisions around the mandate that we have. So I think you've captured that in general terms. Certainly what came up in our discussion group. Obviously there's more nuances and examples that we could give that would expand on those details. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hillian. Yes, I think one of the phrases that stuck in my mind after I had a number of conversations with the groups was you didn't want to close the door. So again, I think it was, unsure, uncertain, didn't want to say an absolute no. And I think that is reflected in the numbers that I showed you. Director Lee.
Thank you. I would just like to say that the board needs to realize that our taxpayers are property tax owners. That is why the province is responsible for providing healthcare services overall, because they have a more global budget. We, as a regional hospital district representing property tax owners and paying for the hospitals and clinics as we do, we are already heavily loaded. We just learned this morning that our taxpayers are paying $191 this year towards the services that we already provide in the capital we already provide. And so it is a very uneven playing field. We don't have the luxury that Island Health has of running a whole bunch of offices that now need to be consolidated so they can save money. We don't have the luxury of wasting money. We are struggling to support the borrowings that we've already done. We're still paying off the 2 hospitals. We may need to expand the hospitals in the future. Now we've heard from Mr. Sullivan that we may need to put in more psychiatric beds.
Director Lee, if I could just ask you to just hold on to those thoughts and we'll come back to them at the end of the meeting.
Well, I want to make these points now so that we can put the discussions on the right course.
Well, Director Lee, part of my job is to make sure that everyone is heard today.
Okay, that's fine, but I want to make my main points.
Excuse me, Director Lee, this is your chair speaking. Will you please allow our consultant, Allison, to carry on with her presentation? She has assured you will have an opportunity to speak on those issues.
Thank you for not listening.
Thank you, Director Lee, and thank you, Director Cornfield. Anybody else that wants to weigh in on the data? And if not, I will just suggest we take a short 7 or 8 minute break, and then we'll come back and present some of the concepts from Island Health and hear from them as well. So we will reconvene at 10:45.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Director Moran, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Edwin?
You're all good.
Jawohl, Capitan.
Okay. Allison, are we just about ready to go?
Yeah, I was just going to call us back together, and Chair Cornfield, I understand that you have some things that you wanted to say too.
I do. And thank you, Allison. You know, I've been very proud of our board and the ability for all of us to work together and really build something. I'm still amazed, you know, that we were able to construct, working with Island Health in the province, 2 brand new hospital facilities. And it's because we've been unified and together. So I would, couple of things is for us to listen, to give Allison a chance to give her presentation. But I would also wish to encourage participation by all of the board. If you have a thing, an item that you would like clarified or feel hasn't been addressed, then please bring it up, raise your hand, and yeah, it's together we can accomplish an awful lot of good stuff and good things. So please, let's listen more than we talk and give Allison the opportunity to finish her presentation and work with us to get us back on the right track. So thank you. Allison, it's all yours.
Thanks, Chair Cornfield. Just before we turn to Island Health's information here, I just wanted to sort of say that where we're hoping to get to by the end of today is just some sense of where the board wants to go to next. What, you know, do they want the staff to provide options or further information, or is it down tools? So that's kind of where we're headed today. So again, in response to the requests that I heard when I spoke to the various groups, there was interest in hearing more details about some of the possible projects coming from Island Health. And my understanding is that we have Scott and Chris from Island Health here today, and we know that their time is limited with us. So we're hoping that we'll have an opportunity to hear from them. And what I have proposed is that I'll just walk through these briefing notes that you all have copies of, and I'll just maybe stop at the end of each one to ask if Scott or Chris has anything that they wanted to add. And I should say, I want to thank them for the information that they provided for these. And yeah, so we'll just start with the community lease consolidation for community health and service hubs. Yeah. No, I just want you to go to the next slide, if you could. So the potential here, and you heard a little bit about this when we met last time, is the possibility of bringing together various community health services that already exist into a central hub, which in the view of Island Health, you know, is intended to improve health outcomes. The need is for approximately 15,000 to 30,000 square feet, and there are order of magnitude costs there for you to think about. And the idea is that the hospital district could build and lease to Island Health. And so this would be different from your previous funding arrangements where you have handed over funds to Island Health to build capital, which they would then own. This example or scenario is where you would build and lease to them. And the briefing note includes some of the details of that lease. So Scott or Chris, anything you want to add to that?
Thank you very much, Allison. Yeah, just to add in response to Director Lee, you had indicated that this would be wasteful when in fact it actually would provide significant economies of scale and economic benefits to both Island Health and the regional district, in that you as the owner of the facility would have your part of your debt serviced by Island Health lease payments, and at the end of the lease you would own an asset. So presents kind of a win-win scenario, and it's actually been employed in a number of other jurisdictions, including the Capital Region, and I believe in the interior, the municipality of Summerland has actually just signed an agreement with the Doctors of BC, or I think it's a division of family practice there, to build a primary care space that they would then own and lease back to the doctors. So there is precedent for this type of arrangement around the province.
Thanks, Chris. And I'll just say the two examples that I have later on to walk you through, one from Powell River Regional Hospital District and one from the Capital Regional Health District. Those are for complex care facilities, but the arrangement is similar. They were build lease arrangements, one with Coastal Health, one with Island Health. And this is a similar model. Again, the advantage to Comox Strathona Regional Hospital District is that you hold an asset at the end of the 25-year lease. Any questions about this? And maybe if I could just ask, we can talk about people's points of view perhaps later, but if we could just kind of, especially because Island Health's time is limited here, if we could just focus on questions to them about this model. Director Evans? Oh, I'm sorry, Director Hamir. Is Director Hamir first?
No problem.
You know what, I can wait till the end because mine is more of a general nature than to this slide specifically. Thanks.
Okay. Director Evans?
Thank you. And just specific to this slide, in this model, were there any projections made in terms of maintenance and ongoing operating costs? So it's one thing to look at a potential build model, but then I'm just wondering if there were any projections that would look at annual costs over and above the lease build arrangement.
I can take that question, Allison, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so the arrangement, at least the one that we have with the Capital Region, for the duration of the lease, Island Health essentially becomes a de facto owner of the building. So we actually provide all of the ongoing maintenance costs and maintain the facility and the grounds. The regional district is really just a landlord in name, and they receive monthly payments to cover their debt servicing obligations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And I'll just say in my discussions with Powell River Regional Hospital District, they have established a reserve fund and actually receive a portion of their lease funding is specifically allocated for asset management over the term of the lease. So that was definitely anticipated, and as your question suggests, you would definitely want to be thinking about that. Director Anderson.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. This seems to be very similar to the kind of arrangements that the regional district sometimes has with libraries. And I'm just looking to see if anybody on staff or directors could say so or otherwise, where we indeed build the facility, own the facility, finance the facility, because rural can't borrow much as I think Island Health. Because we have some experience of that. So if that's similar, that might provide maybe some comfort or some knowledge. I would like to know if Island Health could speak at all to what kinds of services that are looking to be consolidated and why this is proposed for the Comox Valley area, if there's opportunities in other areas for these kinds of consolidation of services, and what it would take to get us from here to a little bit more business case detail for our consideration. Thanks.
Would you like me to take that, Allison?
Yeah, please, Scott.
Certainly, I think you're correct around the comparison to libraries. Island Health cannot borrow. Once our capital is fully allocated, it's hard for us to do these sort of marginal projects going forward. So similar rationale in terms of the types of services to be consolidated. There are community health services, mental health services. There's also opportunity through consolidation of other community services to develop a hub that would not only include health services, but even housing support and other community services that the regional district might want to support or integrate. And that creates more of a sort of a holistic community hub. Could also support youth and seniors, et cetera. So there's a vast array of opportunity in terms of what could go into a facility like this. But from Island Health's perspective, in terms of need, we do an analysis of our leased spaces across the island every year to identify those that are in need of renewal or replacement. And those in the Comox Valley are sort of the ones that are next in line. We've done this type of consolidation in a couple of other communities recently, and the next in line is Comox. That's not to say that we couldn't do it in other communities. It's just that we know that we have a need in Comox.
So my follow-up to staff then on this is, would there be a possibility of this being taxation neutral, like we've done with the libraries, where we essentially are just the bank, we do long-term borrowing, and the health authority would pay all of those borrowing costs?
Thanks, Director Anderson. And I'm going to ask Mariah just to briefly comment on the little bit of analysis we've done given our current fiscal situation and some opportunity that may exist. Of course, if there is board interest and consensus, we would be coming back to you at a future point to really get into more detail and explore what that arrangement can look like. Mariah?
Great. Thank you, James. Through to Director Anderson, following the board's discussion at the last meeting, wanted to explore these few areas and also wanting a bit more data on sort of business cases and having that information to feel informed to make decisions. That's sort of where the information is provided within the updated white papers, which provides you a bit more information about kind of scope and size of long-term care, consolidated lease, as well as, potential impacts financially. So following that, staff, we've done a bit of analysis, looking at our current funding situation, knowing that we have approximately $23 million of reserves available. Also looking that by the end of 2028, that $10.8 million of debt servicing for the North Island hospitals will be coming off. We've considered if we were to move ahead on these items, including long-term care and the consolidated leases presented to you, we could utilize those reserves to, if we use debt financing for these items, as noted, we could use those reserves. And by the end of 2028, still have reserves left and then transition over to the debt servicing falling off in 2028. So sort of, looking at a cost neutral solution to sort of maximize those funds you've already put aside. And then, that $10.8 million in 2029 could be reallocated to the approximately, say, $3 million of these other items because they're quite small in scope and size for the long-term care. And the other, just as an example, at that $60 million of long-term care with our 40% portion of 24 over a 20-year term, that would provide about $1.7 million annually. And then that consolidation lease, our cost is $220,000 annually. So there's real opportunity here to maximize those available funds and still, end up at, say, 10 million of reserves at the end of, that 2028 period. And then taking that $10.8 million, we could fund these easily, as well as start planning ahead for those asset management needs that we've talked about, whether it's through North Island Hospitals, the lease, so we're in quite a good position because of the reserve levels we have and because of, our significant investment has been made with the hospitals. So these projects actually are quite, smaller in scope compared to where we've been before. So we have a real opportunity here to invest in these areas if the board so wished, using the available reserve funds that you have.
Thanks, Mariah. And I'll just note that in my discussions with the Powell River Regional Hospital District, their goal was to have the lease payments fully cover the borrowing costs of both the capital and the maintenance reserve funds. So I think that if the board was looking in that direction, that's probably the goal that you would want to set for yourselves. Anything else, Director Anderson?
Oh, that was very informative. I think for me, there's a really big difference in consideration about whether we're providing X percent contribution towards things versus essentially being a bank and having our costs covered. It's a very different discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Morin?
Great, thank you very much. I'm hoping I can squeeze in 2 questions because I haven't spoken too much. The first one is around the housing supports. I wondered if you could give me, if Scott could please give me a bit of elaboration on what that actually looks like in practice, what some of the models are around that are currently happening. And then I have another question as well.
Sorry, my dog just barged in. We're still very early on in planning for this. We haven't invested a ton of resources or effort in looking at what partnership or development might look like, because we don't know that there's funding available, and we have a lot of priorities and generally focus our planning resources on those that are funded. So I can't really speak to exactly what that would look like, but we do know that BC Housing has in the past been very interested in partnership on these types of facilities. So it could be a range of housing from supportive housing to it could even be market housing, depending on what the regional district wanted to buy. And there's also the possibility of partnership with the municipality on developments that could revitalize the downtown, including rec centers, fitness centers, et cetera. And we would be absolutely interested in sort of a partnership model where we kill a lot of birds with one stone.
Right, so that could be taking as an example supportive housing and having a hub with some medical services provided there, a kind of a wraparound services, something like that.
Correct. And I'll just caveat that the more partners you get involved, the more complex the projects become and the more difficult they are to move forward. So certainly happy to explore those opportunities, but just want folks to be cognizant of the complexities.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just add, I didn't spend a lot of time looking at this in my discussions with the Capital Regional Hospital District, but one of their projects, the Mount View project, part of that is long-term care, part of it is BC Housing. So there are examples, if the board was interested, there are examples elsewhere of these, more complex projects that you could take a look at.
Well, I would say that I'm, definitely in favor of looking at those kind of options, because we know that that all these issues are related, and folks who are, don't have housing or living in poverty, mental health and addiction, of course, have really complex medical needs that may be not being addressed in kind of our traditional hospital, and maybe could be addressed in a different way in a different type of center. So that kind of leads to my second question, which was around, it sounds to me like if we were to agree to, or were able to provide capital, that many of the programming costs obviously would be covered by Island Health, because those would be based on identified needs in the community, like perhaps a mental health addiction treatment center or something like that. So we're kind of, already addressing those community needs that, frankly, I think is probably the main thing that I hear from the community of what we need. So is that correct, that that obviously the programming and operational costs would be covered in these situations? They would be, these things would be identified as a need, and then we would contribute capital?
Correct. Island Health would operate the spaces. You would just be a landlord. And certainly there could be opportunity through development to even expand those services if we could build more space than we currently have. You know, we would be taking on the operation of those spaces. I also just wanted to clarify a comment made by one of the previous directors around the debt servicing and the comparison to libraries. I'm not familiar with how you fund the libraries, but we have to ensure that if we enter into this type of agreement, that it qualifies as an operating lease and not a capital lease. And so one of the key criteria of that is that the present value of the lease payments have to be less than 90% of the fair market value of the asset as it's built. And generally that's hard to do in most, you know, build lease back circumstances, but we've been able to make it work in other jurisdictions because of the 40% cost sharing. So to clarify, we would be asking for the board to borrow the funds to build the facility and lease it back to us at a cost that covers 60% of the borrowing. The remaining 40% would be covered by your traditional grant, but it's going into a facility that you own. So it's really taking that 40% and giving it to yourselves rather than giving it to us, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Scott. And that some of those details are outlined in the briefing note about this for directors if they want to look at that.
Okay. Thank
you. Director Lee, question?
Thank you, Scott. I think it's commendable that Island Health is looking at consolidating their locations that they're leasing right now. I don't think it's our board's responsibility to provide you with a building and for housing all these services that should be 100% paid for by the province. Our taxpayers would not appreciate.
Director Lee, do you have a question? Do you have a question for Island Health? And we'll again.
I would like to have way better information than this sketchy proposal.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I think that's where we're trying to get to. Director Adams?
Thank you. And just following up on Director Morin's comments, which I really appreciated, looking for more clarity of what may be included in community health and service hubs. In our previous regional board meeting, there was a listing that had mental health and substance abuse, also rehabilitation and some other things. But knowing that the Comox Valley has got a warming center that is funded out of requisition, Kamloops has got a similar type warming center that is funded by private sector. These are places for our most vulnerable to go for meals, for laundry, for showers, for cleaning, but would be far more effective if they also included mental health and addiction counseling and services, and maybe even some housing. Is that the type of thing that you're talking about with community health and service hubs that may take the pressure off of our acute care?
Absolutely, that could be an option, Director Adams. It's as has been stated, this is very, very conceptual, high level at this point. If we were to receive a signal from the board that they were interested in pursuing some sort of agreement like this, then we could really start to dig into the planning and develop a very fulsome and robust business case. We just don't want to do all of that work until we are confident that there's a funding source, either through partnership with the board and other parties, or through our own routine capital. So absolutely, I think there's opportunities to look at a variety of options. And maybe I'll just ask Max or Chris if they have any comments on the services that are currently provided in the existing leased spaces that we would be consolidating, because those ones we know for certain we would need to move into a new location, but obviously open to adding anything that would be synergistic with those services at a new location as well.
So Max or Chris, is there anything that you want to add at this point?
Well, just to answer Scott's question. So the existing leases we have about three different leases in downtown Courtenay related to mental health and substance use. And we also have, I think, 3 locations for our home care support staff, our community health services staff. And so trying to consolidate those would be great benefit to the program in terms of not having to have 3 different, administrative areas, etc. So just our current leases, we didn't have the opportunity to expand them as our programs expanded. So now we're just trying to figure out, okay, how can we get those programs linked together as they should be.
Thanks, Chris. Max, anything from a programmatic perspective?
Yeah, just, adding to that, having toured some of these spaces, there's some really great opportunities to be able to create more welcoming spaces for individuals within the community. There's a need for us to be able to expand on some very important programs, and knowing where we can consolidate programs such as home care and mental health substance use. We can use those increases in resources to be able to provide more wraparound supports. We also have a primary care network within the Comox Valley that is slowly becoming established. There's going to be a need for some physical space around that group. And then there's a big need for us to be able to expand into some new programming and to also be able to provide services for walk-in wound care and other assessments and care. And there's, when I'm coming into this from another jurisdiction, when I see what we have set up and the opportunities that would be provided to the community and how those outcomes will be positive based on other literature and experiences elsewhere. There's just an amazing opportunity here to be able to, even though as Scott said, it will be difficult, to be able to work with a lot of the major players to be able to create a very innovative health hub and to be able to provide some exceptional services for the population here. And, I think there's an opportunity for us to take that concept and explore the possibilities of that in Campbell River as well.
Thanks, Max. Anything else, Director Adams?
Yeah, just thank you for that closing comment, because, as we do have fragmented support services scattered throughout the downtown core, our current warming and meal service center is temporary with a short-term lease that will need a permanent home to go. And certainly like the idea of consolidation and efficiencies to deal with a growing issue right across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Abram.
Thank you, Allison. First of all, I just say as a facilitator, I would hope that you would look at first-time speakers occasionally. This whole thing, build and lease. Okay, so we build and lease. This is not a library model, sorry. We were just told it's going to be, okay, we borrow the money and we get 60% of it paid back. Build and lease sort of situation with the libraries is we get it all back. So, that other 40% is going to come from where? Our tax base. So, a lot of this to me is people are misinterpreting, directors are misinterpreting what model is being proposed here, or else I've got it all wrong, which could possibly be. And in the end, we own it. Okay, so how do we fund it in the end? To be talking about, we talk about leasing it back to doctors. We can't even get a doctor. We can't even get doctors to come to remote places. So there's a real difference there. If we had, doctors just dying to get in here and work at our facilities, that would be great. They'd probably all be in a bidding war to lease space, but it's not that way. We spent 2 years trying to get a doctor into our Quadra Island Medical Facility that was going to have to close down had I not been able to get such incredible support from Vancouver Island Health Authority to help fund them for a year with administrative costs, which they did. And we were able to keep it open. The other part of it is that the extra services that are being suggested that we're going to possibly add to these wonderful facilities that we're going to build, lease, and fund at the end when we own them, this is pie in the sky. You know, we don't even have enough money in our health budget to fund the health system as it is. And with COVID
Director Ingram,
for...
Director Ingram, if I could, do you have a question for Island Health?
Yes, my question was you just interrupted it. How are we going to fund these facilities on an absolutely overstressed budget at the Ministry of Health? There's my question.
Thank you.
So as I previously mentioned, we have existing lease budgets that we would free up if we were to consolidate. So that would be a revenue stream. We have existing operating budgets that would come with those programs that are relocated. So that's also a revenue stream. And as we expand services, the Ministry of Health does provide us with operating uplifts in order to support those services. So that's a third revenue stream. So we have a bit more growth and flexibility in our operating budgets than we do in our capital budgets, which is why this proposal is being presented. Certainly, if we had larger capital budgets, we wouldn't be entertaining this, but we don't. We have more flexibility on the operating side. So just want to explore it as an opportunity that is mutually beneficial in that Island Health gets a space that we otherwise wouldn't, and the regional district gets an asset at the end of the day that will continue to generate revenue in perpetuity.
Thanks. Any other questions, Director Abram? So, Scott, I think we have you until 11:30. Is that right?
I actually think I can stay for the full hour now.
That's awesome. Super. Thank you so much. Director Kerr.
Thank you. And two quick questions and then a comment. The Comox Valley Nursing Center Hub, is that the model that you're looking at? And also, are we looking at facilities just in the Comox Valley or in Campbell River and the Comox Valley?
Scott?
So I'm not familiar with the nursing facility. I don't think that's been contemplated by us as part of this consolidation. And as I mentioned before, we do have needs to consolidate leases in a variety of communities. We just know that Comox is the next in line in terms of need island-wide. So absolutely would be open to exploring opportunities in other communities as well.
Okay, just a comment, putting a focus on a men's health perspective. I don't particularly think that integrated facilities necessarily work well for men's health, especially when we're addressing addiction and mental health. Integrated facilities are challenging. We already have integrated, and I think men's health isn't served well. And I think men's health care, specific healthcare services, need to be standalone facilities, possibly service hubs dealing with men's health. And I'm not just talking about homeless and men on the street, but I'm talking about men in the community, in the region, that really they don't have access to recovery facilities at the present time. And the majority of our overdoses, suicides, and mental health issues are in that demographic. So I certainly want to advocate for male-specific healthcare services rather than integrated services where they're just a small part of it.
Thanks, Director Kerr. Scott, any comments you want to offer back to that?
Yeah, that's a great point, and certainly we wouldn't be. We're at a stage right now where there's a lot of unknown unknowns. If we were to get a go ahead to enter into some sort of partnership, as mentioned, we would go into a fulsome business case to examine which services would offer the greatest synergies and be most appropriate in a new location. And certainly would consider any feedback in terms of what constituents felt were most appropriate in those locations as part of that process. But we're just not there yet to be making those decisions. Everything that's being offered up today is sort of a very high level, as mentioned, pie in the sky. But we have to start somewhere, and we'll hone that down as we get more focused on our planning efforts, should this be something that the district is interested in pursuing.
Thanks. I have Director Colborne and then Cornfield and Morin. Just acknowledging Director Abrams' comment. I'd like to, before I'll take Director Colborne's question, but maybe invite those who have not spoken yet to if they have any questions. And then it would be great if we could move on to the next item, which is long-term care. Director Colborne.
Good morning, and I really see this as the way healthcare is moving, is doing these kind of centralized, these hubs, these service hubs. I know this is purely investigation, and understand that, but as a board, if this was a way that we chose to proceed, I'm just wondering about, some other directors said, where, the other city center, Campbell River, kind of stood on this, level of need. So obviously Island Health has been planning and doing these reviews of their buildings for quite some time. So how would Island Health inform us of where we were, if this went through, where we were on the next level for a separate facility, for a separate area? I'm just wondering what communication would look like. So that's my first question.
Scott, did you get that?
Yeah, I think so. So we have a fairly robust prioritization process to identify capital needs. And
can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
We can hear both of you.
Yeah, I heard the question. Thanks. And so certainly we can provide you with where Campbell River resides on that list of priorities. I'll be frank, I don't think it's very high at this point in time, but there is opportunity for those things to advance up the list if there's and this is, I know Director Adams is going to say pay to play, but this is not pay to play. It's just if there is a way for us to advance something without having to use capital, then we can advance it more quickly than we otherwise would have. So certainly it's not a super high priority for the organization's capital dollars at this point in time, but it is something that's identified as a need for the community in terms of investment. So if Max and his team can find the operating dollars to make it happen, and the regional district was interested in entering into this type of partnership, then certainly we could advance the planning work more quickly than we otherwise would.
And that leads
any other questions, Director Colbert?
Question, if I could.
Yep, please.
Yeah, so that leads directly into my next question. And I hope that it wouldn't be just Campbell River centrified. I hope it would be all of our named facilities, because we do have multiple named facilities. So when you are in the planning of that, to keep us abreast of where those are on those lists, so we can be preparing for if this is a direction we want to go. So my next question was about service levels and about operation. So there's space, a need for spaces, and a need for staffing. I'm just wondering if this would be a build to fit And if it was a build to fit, how could we guarantee that those would be used to the best of their capabilities? I have an opinion on the Campbell River hospitals and those being used to the best of their capabilities. And I won't get into that, but how can we ensure, if we're building something to fit the needs, that we can keep how can we guarantee that rental and that the service levels will be kept at a certain level? It fills me with a little bit of trepidation. Thank you.
So the agreement that we currently have with the Capital Regional District is a 25-year lease agreement. So we are committed to providing services for 25 years. Certainly, my expectation is that we will provide those services in that location for another 25 once that 25 is up. But previous to my comments around capital and operating leases, an operating lease must be less than 75% of the useful life of the asset. So that would be the maximum amount of time that Island Health would be, per generally accepted accounting principles, allowed to commit. In terms of a commitment to what services are operated in that space, certainly that's not my decision from a capital perspective. I would say our operating folks would probably be reluctant to sign a contract that says we have to offer 3 FTE of mental health services in 3,000 square feet for 25 years, because the way that we deliver healthcare changes. And over the next 25 years, we might not need 3 FTE, we might need 5 FTE, we might need 2 FTE. We might not need to offer a certain service anymore at all because we've, cured cancer, for example. We don't know what's going to happen, and the way that we deliver care evolves and changes. So the way that we use our spaces has to evolve and change. So I can't speak for the operating side, but that would be my sort of expectation of what their response might be. I don't know, Max, if you want to add anything to that.
Max?
No, Scott, you covered that really well.
Okay, thank you. Director Cornfield, Chair Cornfield.
Thank you, Allison. I just had a quick question. It's part of the background. At a previous chairs meeting, we talked about long-term care, and there was a priority list for all of Island Health's service area. And so you could see where you sit, and you understood what the criteria were for this. And Director Adams had brought it up earlier that changes in how we function and operate need to be looked at from a service area, like the entire regional function. And at the chairs meeting, every chair that sits there is always wanting to know where they sit in the pecking order. And to date, it's been pretty good. So my question is, this consolidation of leases, right now you're proposing the Comox Valley. Every community that I'm aware of has similar needs. And so is there a priority listing, and where does our service area fall into it? In other words, how did you derive the priority for funding, and where does this sit relative to other expenditures?
Sure. So we don't have as robust a list as we did for long-term care, but we do have a list of communities in which we know there is subpar lease space and need for lease space expansion. And I believe that the order of priority was the Cowichan Valley, the Alberni Valley, Comox Valley. There's some need in Victoria. And I think that was the end of the list as we had it at that point in time. That's not to say that there weren't others, but those were sort of the highest priorities. We've been able to advance in the Alberni Valley through a similar operating lease agreement with a private proponent. Yeah, so does that answer the question, Chair Cornfield?
Yeah, it's when you said that it's not to the same extent as, say, the long-term care, where every community could see where they sat on the list. And I think that's one thing that is missing and perhaps needs to be done if you're asking us to change our funding model. So thank you.
We can absolutely do that.
Thanks, Chair Cornfield. I'm going to go to Director Morin, and then we're going to move on to long-term care. Director Morin?
Great, thank you. Probably a quick question. I know on the slides, the consolidated services are, you know, stated as such that it's really, sorry, consolidated leases. It kind of gives the impression of only existing services, but I think it's been clear from the discussion that the consolidated approach would, in fact, include expanded services or new services based on the needs of the community. I just wanted to have that clarified, that it wouldn't just be consolidating the existing leases of the services that we have now, because I think that makes a difference in terms of what the commitment might be.
Yep. I would say subject to funding availability, our goal is always to provide the most appropriate spaces that meet the need. And if that need requires incremental space, then certainly we would want to contemplate that as part of a business case. At the end of the day, a business case always needs money to fund it, and so that will be the ultimate decision criteria. But certainly through the planning phases, if this were something that you wanted to come down the road with us on, we would be looking to build space to meet need, not just to replace existing.
Right. Well, I mean, I agree that in the Valley, I mean, the services are all over the place, and it's really difficult for people to figure out where they're supposed to go because addiction and mental health is split into about 4 different buildings. So thanks.
Thanks, Director Morton. So if we could move on to the next slide and long-term care, and we have maybe about 20 minutes left. So I know this is going to be very hard to do, but I want to make sure that we have time to discuss the rural services as well. So maybe if we can take 10 minutes on long-term care and 10 minutes on the rural ones. And if I could just ask the board to focus in on any questions that would be helpful to better understand these topics. The information that we have about the long-term care facility is that Island Health is currently completing a business plan for a 150-bed long-term care facility on the Campbell River Hospital site. They've provided us some data around the demand and the need in the North Island. It's on the screen and it's in the briefing notes that I've provided that they certainly make the case for the need. Order of magnitude costs approximately $60 million and potential for 40% cost sharing. Or alternatively, they have provided the option of, and maybe I'll let you explain this, Scott, for looking at providing a part of this for transitional or restorative care, which would fall into the acute care facility. Anything that you, anything you want to add to that, Scott? That's the high level, and the rest of the detail is in the briefing note.
Just on that last point, we are looking to build these long-term care facilities differently than we have in the past, and to include spaces for services that traditionally may not have resided in long-term care facilities, including spaces for patients with acute brain injury that need sort of longer-term type care that might otherwise have been cared for in the hospital, and or rehabilitation or transitional care. And these are patients that are currently in the hospital but do not need hospital level of care. And so if the board is not interested in cost sharing in the traditional long-term care component of the build, there might be more interest in cost sharing in those components that are currently delivered in the hospital and would be better delivered outside of the hospital in a different setting. And I'll defer to Max to add any color commentary because he's the expert in this area.
Again, the briefing notes cover it really well. There's, again, a fantastic opportunity to be able to shift individuals who are in hospitals into more appropriate settings where we can actually provide them more appropriate care. And I think that's all I'm going to add there.
And if just the two examples that I'm going to use, the complex care facility in Powell River and Summit in Quadra Village and Victoria, these would be kind of similar arrangements, but done in the sort of build lease way. This is not what's been laid out in this briefing note, but there are examples elsewhere of this kind of facility being built by the regional hospital district. So any questions? Director Colburn? Director Colburn. Oh, you know what? Sorry, go ahead.
One, in the briefing notes, potential finance.
Unfortunately, Director Colburn, we just can't hear you. I'm just wondering, is the chat function working? Can we get her to write a question? No. Sorry? No. We'll come back to
So
Director
in
Colburn if we can, just because we can't hear you. Director Lee? Sorry, Director Colburn, we can't hear you. Do you want to? I think you're going to have to mute her. I hate to do this, but we're going to mute you. And we're going to, if you can hear me, ask you to send an email to Jake. This is the beauty of living. Oh, she is muted. That's weird.
Expanding the.
I think it's the time lag.
That's unfortunate. All right. Hopefully, Jake, maybe I could ask you to send her an email and see if we can get her question. Director Lee, question for Island Health. Gosh, maybe we have Director or Chair Cornfield, are you there? Oh dear.
I am here.
Oh, that's good. Because we thought maybe we'd lost everyone.
No.
Can you hear me now?
I had just a quick question, and that's on the briefing notes, and I think it's on your slide there. It talked about capacity, and as I said before, when they looked at long-term care and overcapacity issues, it's very well done looking at various communities on the island, and every one of us could accept the priority ratings because we had all of the background information. However, I noticed in the third bullet down, it said the percent of patients in the North Islands that could have been cared for in LTC ranged from 17 to 33%. And that means at the low end, there were 51 hospital beds, 17% of existing capacity. But our existing capacity in the hospital is only 95 beds. So could Island Health sort of clarify that to me? Because it doesn't seem to add up.
That's likely across both sites.
Across what both sites?
The two North Island hospitals.
Okay, I thought this one was just dealing with the 150 bed long-term facility on the Campbell River Hospital campus.
No, well, so the request is for Campbell River, but this analysis is across both North Island hospital sites.
Oh, okay, super. Yeah. Thank you.
Apologies, should have been clear on that.
No problem.
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Chair Cornfield. Director Lee.
Thank you very much. Prior to the creation of VIHA and Island Health, we had volunteer health boards, and this care that you're describing next to the Campbell River Hospital would have been called in those days complex care. And it was always funded 100% by the province. Again, like the other services, you're asking us for a $20 million, $24 million contribution to a $60 million facility. We don't have that kind of money in our back pocket. And I think,
Lee, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you if you have a question for Island
my
Health.
question is, do you have a category in the provincial health ministry called complex care, which would take care of people who need medical care when, you know, after they're just discharged from acute care? Is there another level of care? I'm certainly not interested in regular long-term care, but if it was appended to our hospital and they actually got medical care, might be a different consideration.
Thank you. Scott or Max?
Yeah, so certainly the long-term care facilities that we're contemplating to build will have complex care in them. The ancillary services that we're mentioning in terms of transitional care, restorative health, would not be complex care. They are what we would call sort of rehab services that are currently existing within the North Island hospitals. So I don't know if Max has anything else to add to that, but you'd mentioned you don't have $20 million in your back pocket, but I do recall earlier on that somebody had mentioned your reserves were $21 million.
Yeah, we're paying for 2 hospitals still.
Yeah, thanks. If I could go to Director Anderson and then Director McCollum, and then we'll just move on to the rural sites if we could. Director Anderson?
I'm on the phone.
Oh, Director Colburn. Okay, you're on the phone now. Great, thank you.
Happy to defer to.
Sorry, Director Colburn?
I said I'll go after the others. Thank you.
Okay, Director Anderson.
Just very briefly, I don't expect you to have the numbers right offhand, Scott and Max, but I think if you bring this back to the board, it'd be really helpful to know what happened to the promised long-term care bed build after the hospital, because our funding of the hospital was conditional upon that. And I know that some have been built, but the information hasn't been presented in a way that has really landed with me or left me with a lot of confidence that that agreement was followed through on. So if we could just get clear on that, that might facilitate this discussion in a better way. Thanks.
Yeah, and I do know that there was additional beds built in the community. I don't off the top of my head know exactly what they were, but they were built in a similar fashion to a summit type agreement where we pay the operating to a third-party nonprofit who builds the facility and operates it.
Director McCollum.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to loop back to some of the information that our CFO provided earlier in response to Director Anderson's question. The way I interpreted it was that given what our current reserves are, what the tax requisition amounts are, and given that we have debt that will expire in the medium term, that the projects that we're contemplating now are most likely to be possible without a change or a major change to the requisition. Could she confirm that I'm interpreting that correctly, or maybe I'm putting words in her mouth?
That's great. Thanks. Mara?
Through the chair to Director McCollum, you are correct. So based on our current, high level calculations, we currently have approximately $23 million of reserves that's unallocated. So just at a high level, what I've done is I've taken our $24 million portion of that 60 long-term care over a 20-year repayment term would be $1.7 million. So I've assumed a debt servicing over 2022 to 2028, but I think that's being conservative based on sort of construction possible timelines if the board was to move ahead on that. But that's around $12 million over that period. which would leave about 10.8 remaining. And then if you were to say, look at the consolidation lease in the Comox Valley that's being considered, our 40% portion of that would be 220,000 annually, which is around 1.5 million. So if both of these projects were funded, that would provide us a reserve balance of 9.3 remaining. So essentially these projects could be funded with existing reserves, maintaining the requisition at that current new level of 12.6. And then sort of falling into 2029, you're going to have that $10.8 million debt that's falling off that, you know, essentially could be reallocated to fund these items, as well as any other potential items that the board may want to consider, as well as planning ahead for the asset management needs of any facilities that the board is considering. So, you know, I really think looking at our current reserve balances and sort of that large debt payment for those significant facilities is really putting the board in a good position to really have an impact on healthcare, you know, across the region, not just sort of waiting for that debt to fall off, but actually because of the reserve levels you already have. So it's, you know, a good opportunity for you to consider. And, you know, if we were to maximize those reserves, you wouldn't see those increases in requisition with those available funds. So, you know, just to give scope and size, the 2 hospital projects that were completed in 2017, 2018, we're at the 600 million level. So our portion was 240 million. So it's very significant. So we sort of, you know, are moving over that big investment, and any of these other facility upgrades are, you know, relatively incremental comparatively. So yeah, essentially, I think there's good opportunity for the board to consider here.
That's great information. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. And I'm just going to ask the 3 remaining speakers to be quick so we can go to the rural facilities. So Director Wally, question to Island Hill.
I'd like to ask Mariah Ford a question, if I may. Is that in order?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so from what you've just said, it seems to me that we have taken 22 million from our taxpayers unallocated reserve. And I expect that what that was probably for was for future extensions to our current hospital. As our population grows, as the need increases, we're going to have to expand that facility. It's by no means adequate capacity as it stands right now. So if we are to use this 22 million in reserves now for some other thing, we're going to have to replace that, which is an additional burden on our taxpayers. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Director Wally, you know, we'd really need to explore that further with Island Health to determine sort of what future expansion may look like, what costs of that would be, and sort of planning ahead for replacement. You know, typically those major facilities are going to provide a service life of, you know, if well maintained, 50 to 80 years. So, you know, we have asked Island Health for that sort of long-term look and investment so we can plan ahead. But based on, you know, the hospital being paid off quite quickly within 10 years, that led to quite a high debt service. So, you know, I feel like we're still in a really good position going into 2029 to take those sort of, you know, 10 million of funds and reallocate them to other projects, as well as provide room for asset management and future expansion. So, you know, that's based on my high-level review.
I wonder if I just might ask, have we had any consideration to returning that 22 million to the taxpayers who we took it from in the first place?
Currently, that's not been the direction of the board. They have been accumulating the reserves since the completion of the project, of the hospital project. And then through this financial plan, those were eliminated by that 4.4, which still leaves you in a good position. And I believe, you know, essentially through the strategic planning process was the chance for the board to really sort of set the direction of future funding allocations and priorities for healthcare in the region. So that's really up for the board to determine what to do with those funds.
Thank you. I'll go to Director Colburn. Quick question.
Absolutely. So I'm just wondering, in the briefing notes, it says under the potential financing partnership, the first paragraph said that this is a project. The second paragraph says that this is a change of mandate. So if this project-based, and if we were to change our mandate to include long-term care, would it only be for this facility, this new facility? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and sorry for the confusion about that. You know, we're just trying to explore these potential options, and there are a couple of different directions that you could take for any of them.
So I would be willing to entertain project-based, but not necessarily change our mandate to include all long-term facilities, because then again, downloading, we're on the hook for what is already there, existing, that should be funded by the province. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question from Director Lee. Quickly, if I could ask you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I can't imagine going back to our finance manager's comments that in 10 years we're not going to need to expand our existing hospitals. They were built.
Sorry, Director Lee, I'm reluctant to do this. Do you have a question, please?
The question is, how can we say that we're not going to have to expand our hospitals in the next 10 years when we're already running at 125% capacity?
I can respond to that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, if you see in the note, so between 17 and 33% of the capacity in the hospital is encumbered by long-term care patients. So by virtue of building this long-term care capacity, you are essentially expanding the hospital capacity by up to 33% at a maximum at one point in the year. So rather than building an expansion to the hospital, which could cost, $5,000 a square foot instead, or I don't know, $500,000 a bed, we're proposing to build a long-term care facility that costs a lot less money to build, a lot less money to operate, and will buy the exact same amount of capacity in the acute care hospitals.
Thanks, Scott. Can I just go back to Director McCollum's question about expanding the mandate? I mean, the board, I just defer to James on this, but the board, I'm assuming, would make decisions and choices on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, that's correct, Allison. I think the point of the strategic planning is to look at interests around potentially expanding beyond acute care, which is what has been the historic norm. But then it does come down to the ongoing conversations with Island Health and annual budgets, and it would be then on a facility or a project-by-project basis as those arise.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. We can just go to the next slide. So just with our last few minutes here, just address the topic of rural health clinics, that clearly there's a lot of interest in this. The current situation is that you provide to these 6 clinics $5,000 annually, unconditional grants generally used for operations. And in addition, within the 1.85 million allocation for capital, there are capital projects funded, and there are several noted there that have been funded in the recent past. And so there is the potential to, as some of the directors said earlier in our meeting, to increase the funding or to further partner to enhance these clinics. So any comments from you, Scott, about this or the needs in this area? And then we'll take questions.
No, I don't have any specific comments. This is more of these grants are more of an operating nature in a lot of cases. So they don't generally flow through my shop, but just suffice it to say that we do know that these smaller locations do require investment. We would prefer at Island Health if the requests for capital investment came through our process and were then conveyed to the RHD through that normal process, in which case you could still increase your allocation. But for any of those sites that aren't Island Health owned and operated or use those grants for operating funding, I would have to defer to Max on that. I don't know, Max, if you have any comments.
Sorry, Max.
The only other comment I have on this is, of these 6 sites, we have other agreements as well to be able to support the provision of care, or they're our own owned and operated sites. There's other, clinics and programs and facilities within the district's catchment area that haven't been included traditionally, and there just needs to be a bit more time to be able to explore the need to be able to include those as well, and to take a more holistic look at this overall program with these smaller grants.
Yeah, and I'll just observe, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a mixture of island health sites. I think Tasas, Zabalas, Cayuca, and Gold River are island health sites, and the other two are not. Is that correct?
I do know that there's a mixture. I don't know exactly which ones are which.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think you had that right.
Sorry, I just missed that.
Yes, you had that right, I believe.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks. Director Anderson, questions?
Yeah, this is something I'm very interested in. I think our rural communities do a lot with very little. So my question is simply, if we were interested in knowing more from our rural communities, these 6 and potentially others, what their capital health needs were, how would we go about doing that? That's not something that the hospital district has generally been in the business of canvassing. So could we request a concerted sort of needs assessment be made by Island Health and report back to us of what our rural clinics are requesting for their healthcare delivery?
Yeah, certainly we can provide that, and generally we would as part of our annual cost sharing request. So our process is that every April 1st, we ask all of our program leadership and sites to submit their request for the next fiscal year. And everybody in every location across the island is at liberty to do so. And those go through a prioritization process. And generally, we would share anything that had been submitted by those communities with this board, because we don't always use all of your cost sharing dollars, and we want to ensure that we're optimizing those funding streams. So whatever's on that list is what they asked for. Chris, I don't know if you have any other comments around that.
No, I don't. Thanks, Scott.
Director Unger, quick question.
Yeah, just a quick one. And I talked to Max about this last week or week before, we had a quick chat. As far as capital projects, I brought the question to him is, our Gold River Health Clinic here is probably 58 years old now. And when are we looking at a possible new build or a major renovation to make sure it's adequate for our residents here? So whether that goes through FEHA or go through Comox, Strathona Health Board or what, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would go through Island Health. 55 years old is relatively young, actually, compared to a lot of our facilities. So certainly it's on our list of facilities that eventually will need to be replaced. And once it bubbles up ahead of those items that are either older or in worse shape, it certainly will be contemplated for replacement by Island Health.
Thanks. Director Morin.
Great, thank you. When I look at this, I think about the impacts of COVID, and I would suspect, and I'm not in the rural areas, so those directors would best know that there may be some capital costs that are necessary due to COVID. I'm thinking in terms of people being discouraged to travel out of the area, so to go to the larger centers for certain services or procedures, and we know that COVID is not going away anytime soon, and so I guess I would be curious whether there's a plan to support some of these rural clinics with other money, COVID money, any grants, because I guess I would think that if rural areas are wanting grants for those types of capital expenses, that shouldn't fall on us. That should fall on other levels of government. So I was just curious to hear Island Health's perspective on that point.
Yep. So we allocated a sizable chunk of our available capital last calendar year to COVID. It was tens of millions of dollars, and it was spread out across our health authority. We had a separate intake process where programs and sites could request capital funding to either augment their sites or buy incremental equipment that would facilitate physical distancing or reduce aerosol generating medical procedures, for example. And all of that money was dispersed last year. So certainly if these sites had needs, they would have asked for them and they would have been, for the most part, funded.
Thank you. I'm going to give the last question to Director Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I think part of my question was already answered because I know our clinic, the floor needs resurfacing. There's issues with pitting. So I assume we would be asking Island Health regarding that. Getting back to what I was saying before with a $5,000 grant, it may have been misconstrued a bit. I know sometimes they're using it for costs like trying to buy a stretcher, which costs more than $5,000. So they're trying to put that money together over 2 years. Is this something we should be applying to Island Health for as well? Or other than that, we need an expansion of this grant because it is pretty low.
Scott, would a stretcher fall into capital or equipment?
Yeah, so sorry, which site is this for?
For TAS's.
Yeah, so that would be requested through our minor capital equipment. And generally the way that funding bucket works is we provide an annual allocation to each program area relative to their existing asset base. So for example, if I have $10 million to disperse and the asset base of the site is 10% of that, then they would get $1 million to do with what they so choose. Sometimes that's not enough to do all of the things that they need to do. So that's likely where they're relying on that incremental $5,000 from the regional district. But certainly their requests do come through that process, and they're at liberty to prioritize those as they see fit.
The other thing is we need some bridging and services here because we need expanded home care services. Without this, we just end up sending our people into Campbell River and they get offloaded there. And I think with some expansion in home care services, we could keep people here a little more. Looking at expansions like things like house cleaning or meal preparation, if people are unable to do that, then they end up going to Campbell River. The other thing we need is more assertive outreach regarding mental health, because at this point, police apprehend them, they go to Campbell River, they come back in a day, and we're stuck with the same issue over again. So these are the sort of services we're looking for in small communities.
Thanks, Davis. Those would be operating expenses outside of the purview of this conversation, but I would encourage you to talk to Max about that because he oversees the operating spends in the geography.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks very much. Again, we really have a question. I'm afraid we have run over time, and I'm very keen to at least try to bring this conversation together so that your staff have some direction. We'll understand if the Island Health folks have to go back or leave us. If I can just go back to this slide. Can you go to that one? What we're hoping for is some indication from the board as to whether or not you want the staff to do any further analysis or bring forward any further information or options on any of these three areas. So we could go around the table, which would take some time. I could ask for a show of hands on each of them. But I think it would be unfortunate if we didn't get some kind of an indication from the board whether they want any further information on these items today. Chair Cornfield, do you want to offer us any suggested path forward?
I'm just going to unmute myself. Um, yeah, I wasn't expecting a question quite that large, but I think when I go back through why we were doing this, it's one of the things is to clarify what our role and responsibility is. So we've seen these three that you have up there, like the community lease consolidation, long-term care facilities, and rural clinic grants. But I still get the sense that we're not clear on what our role or mandate is and what is a provincial responsibility. So it's about what is our role in healthcare, and to clearly define that part first, and then to talk about priorities. Where do things like this fit? Whether or not it's a project by project basis, or whether or not we are in a mandate change. And yeah, so that's, I would say we're not finished yet. If the board does wish additional information from staff or to do some investigations further, then now's the time to make those kind of directions.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion. Director Lee.
Yeah, I had passed the chair over, so I will go back to Allison and see how she wants to handle it. Do you want me to carry it from here, Allison, or did you want to carry on?
I think just before, I'm going to pass it back to you, but just before we do that, I think, because I sense that there will be a black and white motion, which is fine, but there might be another motion that might be in between, which is, do you want the staff to bring forward some options in these three areas? So, but to go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've got a speakers list: Director Unger, Davis, Hamir, and Wally. So Director Unger.
Thank you, Chair. I think my comment was, I think, in my opinion, we as a board need to discuss this a little more, I think, before any recommendation can go to staff. Just my thought.
Okay, so if I can, just to paraphrase, that would be to carry this discussion on at a future meeting.
Correct.
Okay, Director Hamir.
Thank you, Chair. And while I agree with that statement that we can continue on the discussion around what our mandate is, I still would prefer to get some more information from staff. I think I really want to thank Allison and Chair for allowing us to hear some of the options that could potentially come forward. I was one of those directors that wanted to hear some more information, so I appreciate the board allowing us this time. Personally, when from hearing the responses from the folks around the table, there was I see options 1 and 3, the community hub and the rural clinic grants, as having a lot of support. So I'm going to make a motion that the board ask staff to.
Can I ask you, Director Hamir, if you could hang on to your motion? I do have Director Wally, Anderson, and Lee like to
speak.
Yeah, and then I will come back to you for your motion. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Wally.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in total agreement with Director Unger there that it's premature to make a motion at this point. One of the things that I found greatly lacking in our session so far, we had lots of opportunity to ask questions. We didn't have any opportunity really to express our personal opinions and the opinions of our constituents on any of those matters to any real degree. One of the issues that was actually mentioned but never had a chance to discuss was the whole thing of advocacy, where, if I may just make a comment on that for a moment, that in some of those things, like the parking issue, we advocated and we were successful. In other issues like the pathology lab, we advocated, we were unsuccessful. So my feeling is that what we need to do is have a strategic session on effective advocacy and put together a plan, how we can approach senior ministers in government and put some more pressure in the areas that we need to pursue. So I think we need further discussion.
Good, thank you. Director Anderson and then Lee.
Yeah, I just concur with the need for further discussion. I would support, I think, what Hamir wanted to put on the table. I also think that there's a number of us that would be interested in the, instead of the, sorry, I don't have quite the words right, the rehabilitative nature of the long-term care proposal. But we are still at the core, do we want to do this or not? So I think I'd request of the chair, either with the support of our facilitator or not, at the chair's discretion, to have at least a chunk of a regular meeting, if not a separate meeting, to really dig into where we're heading. Because I think if we're going to ask staff to do these things, either we need to know that Island Health is there to put in a bunch of hours, or we need to get really serious about hiring somebody either long-term or on a contract basis to work with this, because I don't think it's fair to ask our admin staff to really be getting into deep healthcare issues. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Good points. Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was getting ready to make a motion to make it clear that we were not going to be partnering with Island Health on capital projects outside our mandate, and until we discuss with the Minister of Health what our mandate would be through the UBCM discussions, I don't think we're ready in any way to make any commitment to any one of these projects. We have just, and so I would like to convey that strongly so that we don't have this recurring strategic plan happening. But I would like to have more information about the hub, the costs. It needs to be more than just a sketch plan. It needs to be more.
Okay, so you're, so
I would defer all of this to the next regular board meeting where the board can discuss.
If I can paraphrase what you're saying, is you would like staff to investigate the community lease consolidation one?
Well, I just want some information. I'm not interested in it at the moment.
No, you're asking for more information, which was Allison's question before as well. And I don't think we're in a position yet to take a motion to defer stuff. So I will go back to Director Hamir, whom I had stood by, who was wanting to make a motion. And let's hear hers.
Thank you.
Director Hamir.
Sure, thank you. I mean, I hear Director Lee's comments. I do want to just focus us back on the issue that the reason that we had these discussions is we have unallocated reserves, and to be able to put those reserves to good use for the community is why I'm asking for more information on items 1 and 3. I don't know if it's so much as an expansion of our mandate. I think these are one-off as projects that we see a need in, and it doesn't also mean that we can't have the conversation concurrently. So I will make a motion that we ask staff to come back with some information on the community hubs and the clinics, the rural clinic grants at the next available, when it's possible for them to come back with more information.
Second, Anderson.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion. Pardon me?
Could I ask a question?
Oh, is that Julie?
Yes, Director Colbert.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, because I know you're participating by phone, so I don't see a hand.
I'm also wondering too, Director Hamir's motion, if there is any information that we could get about also investing capital costs for something like a hub. So to the first option in these rural areas. I think a couple of directors have spoken to that about the need, and that would be a capital expenditure besides the unconditional grant conversation. So I'm just wondering if that's what I would like information on, is how we can hub services in rural areas as well as the hub in Comox Valley. Thank you.
So, so Director Hamir, would you take that as a friendly?
That's a friendly, yeah. I can see that included, definitely.
Okay. Is that clear through Allison?
Yes.
Okay, that discussion on box 1 at the top of your slide would include service consolidation in rural communities.
Well, I think they're probably two different things, but James is nodding his head that yes, we can look at both of them at the same time.
Good. And,
As the seconder to that, Mr. Chair, as the seconder, I think I wouldn't say necessarily it's consolidation of Lease, but rather investigation of rural communities,
I said
rural and urban community hubs of care.
Yeah, I talked about consolidation of community service, but
sure.
Yeah, I think we get the idea, and I'm sure that staff has it as well. Other first-time speakers, Director Will Cole Hamilton. Will?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It just took me a second to unmute. I support the resolution, although I would perhaps like to suggest an amendment. While I don't want to explore long-term care per se, I think the transitional and restorative health option, which got grouped under the long-term care heading, is something that I'd like to see staff explore and bring us back some options as well. So that element of option 2 of the long-term care.
Okay, I'll go back to Director Hamir and Director Anderson's. You willing to accept that as a friendly as well?
You know, I think it was a little bit beyond what I was asking for. I'd be interested in maybe a separate motion if
then
people
you
want
don't know that, and that's fine. I will ask for a separate one. I just wanted to know whether you would accept it as a friendly. If not, we will. Director Cole Hamilton can make his motion following this one. Okay.
I have a question on the motion.
Go ahead, Director Lee.
Yes, rather than just a description of what these are, I would like it to be fully investigated on the financial end. Is that included in the motion? Are we going to get full financial disclosure?
Okay, we'll clarify with what the intent of at least what the motion says, and relative to Director Hamir as mover of the motion.
Chair Cornfield, I wonder if I could just suggest that with the motion, as I understand it, we would be able to provide more financial detail certainly than what's in the briefing notes. And Mariah has provided some of that description, so we'd be able to put that on paper in a staff report to come forward.
Okay. Thank you. Asked and answered, Director Lee, on the motion that's before us right now. Can we have that read back, please?
Mr. Chair, I think the motion is that that staff will prepare a report on the community hub and rural clinic grant opportunities at the next available CSRHD board meeting, including some financial assessment.
Okay, thank you. So is everybody clear? Is there any discussion, Director Anderson? Or is your hand left up by mistake? Seeing as how you seconded.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wanting to get really clear from staff about how you would engage rural communities around these community hubs of care. And we can drill down on that at another time, but I know certainly from the Cortez perspective, there's a lot of ideas floating that haven't been put to paper. So I don't expect this would be able to come back to the next board meeting in any kind of fulsome way.
No, but we have the motion as it's read, and that's what we're on. So, I have one other first-time speaker. Sorry.
Sorry, if I could just make a suggestion.
Yep.
My suggestion is that you take this one step at a time and bring back, some more information and to gauge the level of support, and then again seek more and more detail over time, because I just think that to go all in is maybe the best use of the staff time.
Yeah, my understanding was staff are going to bring us back to a report, which time we'll have more wholesome discussion at the board level and figure out where we're going from there. Right, which I think is what you were saying. So
right, exactly.
I have Director Abram and Director Grieve on the list. Neither one of them having spoken before. So Director Abram.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any problem with, getting more information, but I believe the purpose of our 2-day session was to talk about our strategic direction as to where we're going. Are we going to talk about operations, or are we going to talk about capital? And I believe that this is leading us one direction and not necessarily in looking at the full picture. So
yep.
I think we are very short. I'm sorry, not finished. We are very short of the general information that we need. And I think we need to have that information before we drill down to this level of information.
Did you want to make a subsequent following this one?
Possibly.
Okay. Director Grieve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great discussion all around. But I just want to be clear that this is absolutely not sensitive to our budget. This has absolutely nothing to do with our budget deadline coming up. Is that correct? So we can go on. We can go on for the next 2 years with this conversation. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So, no other first-time speakers. Director Lee.
I just wanted to comment. I have no problem getting further information, but I totally mistrust the process, and I'm not in favor of anything right now.
Okay, thank you. And if you could take your hand down. So on the motion that's before us, I'm going to call a question. Is there anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Was that Director Wally or Director Abram?
Abram.
Okay.
Wally's opposed too.
Lee is opposed.
Who?
Wally and Lee.
Okay. So Wally, Lee, and Abram opposed so far. Is there any others opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Director Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that staff report regarding opportunities to collaborate with Island Health on transitional care and restorative facilities.
Second, Anderson.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chair, could you repeat the motion? It was fuzzy. I couldn't hear it.
I will go back to staff. James, have you got it?
I think actually Lisa's got that recorded.
Yeah, so for staff to report on opportunities to collaborate on transitional care.
And what there was one other one, was there not? Director Cole Hamilton.
Yes, transitional care and restorative health facilities. It's as stated in the briefing note.
Okay. So is the board clear on the motion?
I need clarity on what is restorative health facilities.
I'm not sure if Island Health is there to clarify, but.
I believe it was about restorative health facilities.
Yeah, no, but there was a question about, excuse me, Director Lee. The question is, what does that encompass?
It's rehabilitation facilities. So OT, PT, therapy. Max, anything else?
Yep, and it's 45 days on average stay or shorter than that. So not a residential long-term stay kind of program.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'm going to call a question. Is there anyone opposed?
Lee.
Opposed.
Sorry, I'm Lee and
Wally.
Wally. Any others? Seeing none, I declare the motion is carried. And thank you very much. Allison, back to you, or do you want me to wrap her up?
I think you can wrap her up. I will just offer my regrets. I didn't get to the two examples that I wanted to offer, but you can, they both have very good websites. So the Willingdon Creek Complex Care in Powell River and the Summit at Quadra Village in the Capital Regional District. And you can go and look at those yourselves.
Right. Okay, so if there's nothing more, just to try and close it up, I agree with some of the comments that we have not addressed the advocacy and versus the funding aspect of what our role is, and it needs further clarity. I am, and I'm going to put on my personal hat, I'm still concerned about overcapacity issues at both hospitals. And I think that's something that we need to talk about further as well. So hopefully that will come up in staff reports. And that concludes our meeting for today. We have a lot of work set out for us for future meetings. So I'm just going to go to my agenda here.
May I, sorry to interrupt, may I make one comment?
Who's that?
Max, sorry, it's Max from.
Oh, okay. From Island, sure. I'll give you guys some last minute.
Yeah, I won't take long. Just want to say, appreciate the feedback provided around the need for better engagement in data from Island Health. We heard that loud and clear, and we are putting a plan together to be able to have a better engagement process and more regularly scheduled opportunities for individuals to work with us and provide their guidance.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Scott, did you have anything?
No, just to say thank you for the discussion. It's always interesting and spirited, and you know, hopefully we'll find something that we can work together on to improve health and care in your communities.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, wait.
Could I ask one question, Mr. Chair?
I'll give you the latitude, Director Wally.
Thank you. I'm just curious, are we, have we concluded our facilitated part of these discussions, or is our next board meeting going to be facilitated or not?
How about if you leave that to myself and Vice Chair to deal with staff, and we'll give back a report on where we're at. How's that?
That's good enough.
Okay, so if that's okay with everyone else, we will work with our staff and try and summarize where we're at and where we think we should be going. And then we'll bring that back to the board.
Mr. Chair, I would prefer that our board, friendly, have a discussion with only our board there and not a facilitator steering us towards.
That'll be part of the discussion that.
Excuse me, Chair. Director Adams has his hand up.
Oh, I can't see the hands, Vice Chair Hillian. Let me just find my participants list. Oh yeah, okay. Director Adams.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Hillian, for noticing that. Chair, I just wanted to say thank you for the job that you've done today and tried to navigate a very challenging meeting, and I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you. So we have a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Thank you. Is there any in opposition? Hearing none. The motion carries. So we are adjourned or terminated, I guess is the language used in the